the same thing anyway. Today, I am going to tell the story to you about Solomon building the temple. So it's sort of an end cap to all the classes. You'll have maybe one more discussion after this on Wednesday night. So hopefully this sort of brings all of our class to an end, and the adults can just help us as we look at this concept of Solomon building the temple. I think it'll be helpful to you. Before we get started, I just want to tell you, this throne over here is going to represent the throne of Israel, and this throne over here is going to represent the king of Tyre. Well, the entire building project was phenomenal. How many of you have ever built something you thought was pretty good? You ever built something you thought was pretty good? Several of you, all right? So it could be if you're younger, maybe you build a fort, and you never want that fort to go away because you just had so much time playing in that fort. Before you know it, mom or dad comes along and says, get those blankets out of here, fold them, get them put back up. Your fort has been demolished. Or maybe you built a sandcastle at the beach, and you just thought, man, I'm going to build this. I'm going to make it last forever. When I was young, we built like igloos in the snowbanks, you know, and my mom would always say, don't get in that, it's going to collapse and it's going to suffocate you and you're going to die, you know, because the snow was really heavy. So my mom worried about things quite a bit. But maybe some of you, I know John built a big commercial building that he rents out. Roy's responsible for building a lot of schools. Some of you may have built your own house. But we're building families all the time. We're building things at work. We're building things in our lives. We're building a church together, the Lord's church together here at PSD. So building is very, very important. The building project we're going to talk about today is the most amazing building project, probably the most expensive building project in the history of the entire world. It's phenomenal. I was doing some research, and I do use AI now sometimes, and so I was letting it tell me, how does the building project in Solomon's day compare to some of the big building projects of today? And so it gave me this long printout of how it calculated everything, and it was pretty interesting. I did say you can't use slave labor like he did. You have to use paid labor, and it has to be at union wages. So that sort of makes it a little bit higher. All right. It took less than $10 billion, somewhere between $7 and $8 billion, to build Epic Universe. That's a lot of money. That same amount of money, what it costs to build the temple, you could build 100 Epic Universes. The whole Disney compound as well, all of the parks together, the money that it would take to build that did not compare to what Solomon used to build the temple. Isn't that amazing? I mean, God deserves the very best. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And that was what he was going to get from Solomon. Now, so we're going to start over here in Israel's throne with David, because this whole idea of building the temple was not something that God communicated down to David and told David, I want you to build me a temple. David one day was probably sitting on his throne, or in his house at least, and he was looking around. I have a really nice house here. I have cedar. It's been built out of cedar. It's really, really nice. But yet, the Ark of the Covenant is living and covered up in a tent. This didn't seem right to David. I don't know how many times he paced back and forth in his house thinking, what can I do for the Lord? What can I do to make the Lord's house better than my house? And so he called Nathan the prophet in, and he says to Nathan the prophet, I want to build the Lord a house. And Nathan says, that's a great idea. Do everything that's in your heart. Go ahead and build the Lord a house. Nathan goes back home, and God says, Nathan, you forgot to ask me if I wanted David to build me a house. I have a little bit of maybe somewhat disappointment news to David, but I have some really, really good news for David that I want you to go tell him. What I want you to tell David is he cannot build me a house. I really like the fact that he wants me to build me a house. That says that his heart is right. He loves me, and he wants to honor me by this building project. But he's had war all his life. He's a man of blood. I don't want him to build me a house. But then was the really, 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 really good news. I am going to build David a house. Not a house out of limestone and cedar or gold. I'm going to build him a dynasty. If he and his children will obey my laws and do what I tell them to do, they will always have a king to sit on that throne. Now he does tell them, but if they don't do what I tell them to do, they will not have a king to sit on that throne. It was a very conditional promise, but that is still a very powerful promise. When David heard that from Nathan, he was so amazed by this, he goes to that tabernacle, that tent, where that Ark of the Covenant is, that represents the presence of God. He falls down on his face and he says, God, it is amazing that you've already done for me what you've done for me. You've taken me from being a shepherd. Now you've helped me through all my adversity, and you've brought me and let me sit on the throne of your people and reign over them. And then now, you are promising to set me up a dynasty, to have someone sit on my throne forever. I don't even deserve this. And he was right. God gave it to him, and it was a great promise. Well, David did not just go and forget about this promise. And he did not just say, well, it looks like Solomon has a lot of work left for him when he becomes king. He decides to start planning for this. This is an amazing part of the story. David collects all kinds of money. Gold, silver, bronze, tons of money in order to do this. As a matter of fact, when it's put in the storehouses after the temple is already built, it's estimated to be worth $400 billion. That's after all the temple has already been built. That's how much gold that David had collected. Part of that was out of his personal money. Part of it was out of when they go and they would conquer a territory, they would take a lot of that back. And some of it was he asked the leaders, will you donate money in order to make this a reality? And so they collected all this money. And not only that, you might think because Solomon was the wisest man in the earth at that particular time, and he asked for wisdom from God, and God gave him the ability to do all kinds of amazing things. Architecture, he could plant better than anybody else. As a matter of fact, if there's any science or anything that people wanted to do, if they wanted to know how to do it right, who would they go ask in the entire world? They would go ask Solomon. That's how much wisdom God gave him. But Solomon didn't make the plans for the temple. David, with the Spirit of the Lord, drew up the blueprint on exactly how the temple was supposed to look. So that's what David was doing to prepare for this house of the Lord to be built, even though he wasn't the one to build it. Now, can you imagine? Even though David knew he would never see this, the amount of work that went into this had to be sort of consuming for him at the end of his life. He had to be thinking about this all the time. And then the Holy Spirit was helping him draw up these plans so that he could do this. Well, we've already talked about in our class, there was another one of his sons that wanted to become king. That was put down, and Solomon was declared king. And before David died, he and Solomon have a conversation. And one of the parts of this conversation is, son, be a man. And part of being a man is to do exactly what God tells you to do. If you don't do what God tells you to do, you really can't consider that you're a man. You got to do what God tells you to do. And he laid out all these plans, and he told him the promise that God made, and he told him what he was supposed to do next. So that is sort of setting us up for what is to happen next. Well, about 4 years into his reign, 480 years after they come out of Egypt, Solomon, still over here on this throne, he's taken David's throne now. He decides it's time for me to start the temple. So what he does is he writes a letter. He maybe calls somebody in and says, I want you to dictate a letter. Maybe he put it in his own handwriting. He writes a letter to the king of Tyre. And the king of Tyre is sitting on his throne over here when he gets this letter. And they didn't have tape. Good thing, because I can't get this open. All right, so I tried to make it look like a scroll. Sorry, guys. I was doing my best. All right. So he's over here. He gets this throne from Solomon, and he reads this letter, or has somebody read this letter to him. It says, as you have dealt with David my father, and sent him cedars to build himself a house to dwell in, so deal with me. Behold, I am building a temple for the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, to burn before him sweet incense, for the continual showbread, for the burnt offerings morning and evening, on the Sabbaths, on the new moons, and on the set feast of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. And the temple which I build will be great, for our God is greater than all gods. But who was able to build him a temple? Since heaven and the heaven of heavens can't contain him, who am I then, that I should build him a temple, except to burn sacrifice before him? Therefore send me at once a man skillful to work in gold and silver and bronze and iron and purple and crimson and blue, who has skill to engrave with the skillful men who are with me in Judah and Jerusalem, who David my father provided. Also send me cedar and cypress and algum logs from Lebanon, for I know that your servants have skill to cut timber in Lebanon, and indeed my servants will be with your servants to prepare timber for me in abundance. For the temple which I am about to build shall be great and wonderful. And indeed, I will give to your servants, the woodsmen who cut timber, 20,000 cores of ground wheat, 20,000 cores of barley, 20,000 baths of wine, and 20,000 baths of oil. So this was what Tyre got. When he got Hiram, the king of Tyre, when he gets this, he's happy to oblige. As a matter of fact, I won't read his letter back, but his letter back basically says, I will do whatever you've asked. I've loved David, and God is so good that he has given David a son to sit on the throne who is wise. It's a done deal. You give me the oil. You give me all the stuff that you said you were going to give. You send that up, and I will cut you all the timber imaginable. Now, I think it's very interesting. David not only made the plans and collected the money, he also started getting some workers ready for these jobs. Training them. You know, who are we going to need? We're going to need people who can cut timber. We're going to need people who can cut the stone. We're going to need all these people to get ready. So he started doing this. However, Solomon knew something. This is a house for God. It's got to be grand and glorious. I don't have the best craftsmen. I have good craftsmen, but I don't have the best. Tyre has the best. The guy that you would go to if you wanted an architect in the entire world. I want my building designed by the best architect in the entire world. You would go get this guy. I wanted the guy who can do the stones and the engraving and overlay everything with gold, work with the curtain. I want the best. That's what Solomon wanted to get for God. So once he's got all that, now he knows it's time for me to start building this temple. So one of the things he does is he gets 185,000 men. These are the workers. All right, so that's a huge company. And he's put all of these he has laborers, he has craftsmen, he has about 3,600 supervisors to make sure those 185 plus keep working. All right, so he has the supervisors, he has all these workers, and he has a couple things he needs to do. First of all, the people in Tyre don't have enough laborers to get this work done. So he takes 10,000 every month, sends them up to Tyre. You go cut trees. That's your job. And the way that they were going to do this, the trees were going to be cut down. They were going to be tied together like a raft. They were going to be put in the sea, taken down to Joppa. When they get to Joppa, they were going to be brought out of the water. The ropes were going to be tied off, and then they were going to be carried up to Jerusalem. That was the whole plan for this. So we need 10,000 this month. They come home, sends 10,000 the next month, they come home, and sends a third group of 10,000 the next month, and that was a rotation. So you would go up and cut timber for a month, you would come home and work in other areas for 2 months. And that was those 30,000 people, that's what they did on a continual basis, to get enough timber to come down and to do what this project would entail. Well, the next thing he had to do is he had to make sure there were some guys who can cut the stone. There was a big limestone quarry there around Jerusalem. Here's the thing about this limestone. I don't know if you know this or not about limestone. While it's in the ground, it's fairly soft and easy to work with. So Solomon had a couple ideas here and a couple purposes for this. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the quarry. We're going to get the stone cut out to size perfectly, and then we'll bring it to the temple. One, because it's easier to work with right away. As soon as you bring it up to the air and the elements and the sun, it starts to harden, and it's a lot harder to work with. The second thing that he wanted to do was make a very reverent start to the building of the temple. He didn't want a lot of noise at the temple. You know, all the chiseling and the hammering and all that. This was a holy place. This is where God is going to dwell. And from the very beginning, he wanted it to be a quiet place. And you know, you've ever lived around construction? You ever have your neighbor building a house next to you? Or maybe you stay in a hotel and then you find out they're doing remodel on that. And you're like, I can't get any sleep. That wasn't going to be at the temple. It was going to be quiet. Now, I want you to see this in your mind. Some of these limestone blocks that were used to lay the foundation were the size of a pickup truck, cut out in one piece. And that had to be hauled to the actual building site. Now, they didn't have trucks and no diesel engines, right? They didn't have any big old machinery that could be. They had to figure out how to get those big old blocks to the temple ground. This was a whole lot of work. So now, they've laid the foundation. They built this temple. It was 90 feet long and 30 feet wide. That's not that big. 2,700 square feet. Now, what made it very impressive, you might have high ceilings in your house, 45 feet tall. So it wasn't just like, you know, most of us, if we have 2 stories, we might have part of our house where you have the high ceilings, and maybe the bedrooms where nobody is, sort of high, but not 45 feet high. So these are 45 feet high. So it was an impressive building when they came into town. So once it's finished, everything has been set up, they go in, and on the inside, everything is covered in gold. Everything. I mean, all the walls, gold. All the pillars, gold. Everything. And not only gold, there was the time that was spent to carve everything into the walls that needed to be carved in before they put the gold on. That was the guy from Tyre that came down and oversaw that and did a lot of that himself, along with the people that David had trained to do that. They had the holy place. Now, the holy place, the Holy of Holy Place, is described in the Bible as a cube. Well, the problem is 30 by 30 by 45. So it's probably stairs leading up to the Holy of Holy Places, Holy of Holy Place, to make that a perfect cube. And the amazing curtain was made in order to separate the Holy of Holy Place from the holy place. Not only that, the cherubim, 30 feet. Now, if we don't finish, everybody's going to have to come to junior high class on Wednesday night so we can finish. So, Terry, would you go over there with this? Here, I'll take the dumb end. You take the smart end. All right? All right. You take the smart end. I'll take the dumb end. So, I'm so dumb I can't even get it out of the... All right, so we need 30 feet. I'm going to start right here. So that's a 25-foot tape measure, by the way. All right, tell me where to stand. All right, that's 20. So we need 10 more feet. 30 feet. All right, so you see all the way from where I was standing back here. I'm going to let go. So you stay right there. So all the way from where I was standing from over here to where Terry is about 30 feet. Okay? The cherubim, their wings touched in the middle, but they also touched these outer walls. And just for reference sake, when we get to looking at the outside, the altar where they burnt all the sacrifices was 30 by 30. So 30 and go 30 that way, that is the size of where they sacrificed all the animals. All right, Terry, we can quit for now. Just visualize the size of how big that was. And they offered so many sacrifices at the end, they had to build more altars. because that one big altar wasn't big enough to sacrifice all the animals that they were sacrificing on this amazing occasion. So when you come out, there's the altar that's out there. There's the sea, the bronze sea, that, huge. I think that's 15 feet in diameter. Maybe I forget exactly. Sometimes when you're trying to remember all this stuff, some of the details go away. So when you read it again, just imagine that in your head, how big this was. And then they had those 10 carts that were also used to purify things, and these big columns that were in front of the temple. Everything on the inside overlaid with gold, those cherubim overlaid with gold, and then, of course, we're going to bring the Ark of the Covenant and put it down there as well. Everything, and that curtain, it's just an amazing thing. So I tried to paint somewhat of a verbal picture for you. I'm going to do something a little bit different. Roy's helping me out here. We're going to have a small, maybe 1 minute video that sort of takes us through some of this visually. So go ahead, Rory, if you can get it going. All right, I meant to tell you to go beyond that, but it's perfect. All right, here we go. Just notice what some of this stuff looked like. Oh, by the way, this was at where David bought the threshing floor, and probably where Isaac was almost offered up as a sacrifice. Those pillars, he named the pillars. Oh, the storehouses on the side are also amazing. The candles, I forgot to mention the bread, the table for the showbread, the candlesticks, all the engraving that went in. He has a couple different pictures of what the cherubim could look like. That's the one I like the best. All right, I think that's enough. Maybe you guys get a feel. Let's go a little bit further. Let's go until we get to the outside. See, you have the carts on the side, and then maybe it'll show you the altar in a second. These two pillars were just meticulously made. All right, that's all it shows. So that's a pretty amazing project when you get it all. So can you imagine Solomon gets all this done? If you ever built something or had something built, what do you do at the very end? You do some kind of a final walkthrough, right? I can't imagine Solomon taking a final walkthrough to the temple grounds of the temple, and everything was perfect. And so we get to a moment where he decides, now it's time to do what we came to do. This is the moment of climax in the story. They moved the Ark of the Covenant. Now just imagine being here. They said all Israel's present. I mean, this is up on a mountain, so the valleys are probably filled with people. And so now this is a solemn moment. The priests are going to get the Ark of the Covenant, and they're carrying it on their shoulders like they're supposed to, because David learned that lesson, passed that on to Solomon. Don't make that mistake again. And they carry the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it in the temple underneath those two cherubim. And the glory of the Lord filled the temple. You would never forget being there. I guarantee you that. If you were there the rest of your life, you would talk about it, you would tell everybody about it, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. What was it like when he did that? One of the things they did, they sang a song as it went over there. The Lord is good and his mercy endures forever. This was their song. Whenever anything happened, that's the song that they sung. And they were singing it at that particular occasion. The glory of the Lord filled the smoke. The cloud was so intense that all the priests had to get out of there. None of them could do what they were going to do. And so Solomon takes that time to dedicate everything he has done for the Lord so it can be used for his honor and his glory. So one of the things he does is he blesses the people. Then he gets down on his knees. He has built a platform for himself. He gets down on his knees, raises his hands to heaven, And he says an incredible prayer. We don't have time to read the entire prayer. If you want to go back and read this, just spend some time on it this week. That'll be helpful to you, I think. It starts out, God is awesome. God, you've kept your promise to put me on the throne, and you've kept your promise to allow me to build this temple. And then he starts talking about some pretty amazing things. When we, your people, sin against you, and as a result of our sin, some kind of punishment befalls us, and we realize that connection, and we turn back to you, we turn to this temple where your name is, and we pray and ask you to help us, please help us. So that's sort of the way this prayer goes. Bad things are going to happen. So some of the bad things that might happen as a result of the sin, there could be disease in the land. And we realize this disease was caused because we disobeyed you and we turn back to you. Hear that prayer, maintain our cause, or help us. If there are locusts or grasshoppers that come, if there's a famine that come, if we're taken away into captivity, and when we're from a foreign land and we realize, boy, we really messed up, and we turn and face this temple where you have put your name, and we say, God, we are sorry. We have messed up. Hear them and maintain their cause. Help them. And this prayer, I know I've told you this before, multi-generational prayer, because it's answered over and over and over hundreds of years after he prays it. It's answered. When the children of Israel do that multiple times, God answers that prayer. And so the people then decide, we're going to offer sacrifices. And one part says they couldn't even be numbered. Another part, it does give some numbers to some of the ones that Solomon offered up. All day for 14 days. They're having this feast, dedicating this temple to the Lord for 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, they say, hey, let's keep doing it. Let's keep praising and honoring God and offering sacrifices to Him as we dedicate this temple to our God. He sends all the people home. The priests continue to do what they're supposed to do. All of Israel has peace. This is a great time. I mean, that was a great day. That was a great moment. And God continues to bless Israel. We know the junior high is going to find out on Wednesday what happens to Solomon. Most of us know what happened. But for right now, everything is wonderful. As a matter of fact, one of the things that just blows my mind about how great things were happening in Israel at this particular time, well, first of all, when they were calculating building the temple, they didn't even calculate the bronze. It's like, there's so much bronze being used. We can't weigh it all. We can't calculate it. And then it says that silver. Anybody have any silver jewelry on, or have it at home, or maybe you have a whole bucket full of silver, or you have I know some of you probably have tons of silver. It said in Solomon's time, silver was like gravel. That's how rich they were. This sort of goes, Brian's talking about Ecclesiastes in the daily Bible reading recently. Every single plate, bowl, or cup in Solomon's own house, because he builds his own house after this. Interesting. It's bigger than the temple, but there's nothing about David's castle or palace or Solomon's palace that says anything about overlaying anything with gold. I'm sure they had nice stuff, but the overlaying of gold seems to be reserved for the temple. And that's what brings the value way up. Everything with gold. I mean, he wouldn't even have a silver cup in his house. Can you imagine that? I mean, we've joked, I don't know if I've joked it here. I think I did, because Terry Tokash made fun of us. We have china that we've never ever used. Maybe 5 times in a box. I mean, glasses that you would use, Solomon would never consider to drink out of that. I mean, my lips are not going to touch anything that's not gold. That's how great it was. So this was one of those incredible moments in the history of God's people that I would have loved to be. If you're talking about events in the Bible that I would love to be at, this would have to be one of them. I mean, I know the Red Sea crossing goes up there, but this day where the glory of the Lord filled the temple. So get your outline out now. We have a couple things to fill out. And I wrote an article in the bulletin because Shelley and I have enjoyed so much teaching junior high class. We've been telling these stories, and it's been so fun for us. And I think the kids have enjoyed it too, just hearing these stories from God's book. These stories are meant to make us bond with God. And if we can do anything with our kids, we want them to have a relationship with God. We want them to think God is awesome. God is amazing. And all the details of life will sort of figure themselves out if they always feel God is amazing, God is awesome. And then when they won't be shaken as much when bad things happen because God's on my side and God is awesome. I know that because I know all these Bible stories, right? And it's meant to sort of bridge the gap between the past and the present. So let's look at this. The big question for us is, what can we learn from Solomon's temple that applies to us today? A couple things. One, give God your best. He deserves it. And that has a lot of application for kids and for grown-ups. You know, if you're a kid, giving God your best might be doing your best at school. So it's a fair question to ask your kids, are you giving God your best at school like Solomon gave God his best when he built the temple? Are you giving God your best when you do your chores around the house? You know, you walk in the room, is this really good enough for God? Are you giving God your best? And for us as grown-ups, it also applies. What about work? Are you giving God your best at work? When you go to work, remember what did we learn from the New Testament? When we work, we don't work for men. We work for God. Are you doing your best for Him? What about in our relationships? Not only our relationship with God, but moms and dads and children, are you giving your best to your family? Are you being the best dad you can be? Are you being the best mom you can be? Are you building the best family that you can build with what God has given you? And what about us? That works for us as well as a group of people. 2, prepare like it matters because it does. The temple, great things don't happen by accident. People don't do great things unless they're really working at doing great things. Solomon prepared, David prepared. And so as we try to encourage our kids, you need to do your best on this project, this science project. You need to study for this test. You're not going to get an A without preparing. You're not going to do your best work unless you spend time preparing. Do we prepare to come here every Sunday? Get our minds right. Get our worship hearts on as we come together and worship God together. The same can go for adults as well. What are we doing? Success is going to require preparation. Are we preparing? You know, if you have kids, how are you preparing to raise your family? Even if you don't have kids right now, you're too young to have kids. Are you reading books about parenting? Are you asking other people who have raised successful children? How'd you do that? You know, what was some of the techniques Are you reading the Bible on what it takes to raise successful children? Sometimes we get overwhelmed with life. Have you ever been overwhelmed with life? I have definitely been overwhelmed with life. And you forget to prepare. And that is not going to work. We need to work together to succeed. 183,300 workers from different nations work together to build the temple. Great things happen in a family when the family decides to work together. Great things happen at a church when everybody decides to work together and no one's pulling in the wrong direction, and we spend time developing authentic relationships. And we know that we love each other and we're all working in the same direction. And hey, what does that take? Whatever it takes, I'm willing to contribute that. Time, resource, whatever I can contribute, I will do that for the betterment of this particular church. And here's point number 4. God wants to dwell with us. That's an awesome thought. God has always wanted to be with His people. God wants to be in your heart. His Spirit wants to dwell in us. And as a church, His Spirit dwells in us as a collective. Do we take that seriously? I mean, that day, if we could just relive that day, I think it would be a very, very important day. The other thing I have here, I have some discussion questions that you can ask your kids, is just sort of get them talking about this, thinking about how big and powerful this was. And you can ask them things like, what part of the temple would like to see the best? All right, so if you were going to get a tour of the temple, what room would you spend the most time in? You've gone to museums, you've gone to maybe open houses. If you went to the temple, what room would you want to go in? You know, let them talk about that for a little while and sort of discuss that with them and why that happens. Why do you think God wanted everything so beautiful? I mean, if we're not careful, we might say, you know, that was a little bit too much. You know, that was over the top. Who was it for? It was for God. So what would be the benefit of having it, well, all that gold? You could talk about that. How was your heart like the temple? What's something that you could do to show your excellence to God this week? And so have those type of discussion questions. There's also some conversation starters. So I'm going to go straight to the final point here. Solomon's temple was magnificent, but it was temporary. It did take 7 years to build, by the way. It was temporary. It was destroyed 400 years later. And then Herod built another amazing temple, and it was destroyed in 70 AD. What God does in our life is never going to be destroyed. And what did he say about his church? The gates of hell will not prevail against it. What we're building together, what we're building in our families, what we're building for God is going to have eternal ramifications. It's going to last forever. And so we should take it as serious or more serious than David and Solomon took building the temple that was destroyed. Because, I mean, one of the things God said at the end was, you know what? This temple is only going to last if you keep doing what I say. If you don't do what I'm going to say, I will tear that temple down. I will turn it to nothing. And I will take you out of this land and scatter you throughout the entire world. So, and when people ask, what happened? They'll say, they stopped obeying God. They turned to idols. And God left them because of that. What about you? Have you started your journey serving God? Have you become a Christian? All of your sins can be washed away if you're immersed in water, and then you're part of God's family, and you can start building something amazing. If we can help you in any way get right with God, or if we can help you build your life in such a way that God is honored and glorified, we will be glad to do that. Let us know as we stand and sing.